Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of appropriate ages, get ready for another episode of AZA Commander Podcast. Greetings and salutation, everybody. Welcome to the AZA Commander Podcast, where we talk about the Magic the Gathering Commander format. My name is A Zombie Apocalypse. You can find my gameplay videos of Magic the Gathering and other games on Twitch and YouTube.
Hello again, my friends and my occasional opponents. I am Jetterex, which I just found out in Ancient Dominarium means Tim.
Nice.
I occasionally stream MTG Arena on Twitch, and you can also find me playing Commander with Zombie and other randos on his Twitch and YouTube streams.
Before we get started today, we want to remind you the best way to support the podcast is to watch this and other videos on YouTube and tune into our streams on Twitch and follow on your favorite podcast listening apps. Links in the description below. So what are we talking about today?
So today we are going to talk about playing Magic the Gathering on Spelltable. So we've come to rely on this program, and we've talked about it quite a lot in our previous conversations. So we thought it might be useful and or fun to share our experiences with you and talk about how you can use Spelltable to the fullest. So, but before that, this.
In these uncertain times, your health and safety are more important than ever. You deserve to live life without fear of contagious disease or social ridicule. But how can anyone feel safe in a world where atypical canine respiratory disease is on the rise? Why should you have to practice personal hygiene just because others make a fuss about it? The solution is simpler than you think. Visit your doctor and ask them about Spelltable. Spelltable is a simple, easy-to-use treatment that helps everyday folks get back to doing the things they love. Studies have shown that regular use of Spelltable can help increase the frequency of your Commander games, as well as your overall sense of well-being. Contact your doctor today to see if Spelltable is right for you. Spelltable may cause internet lagging, reduce cell phone battery life, danger to any cardboard boxes you may have lying around, irresistible destructive tendencies in your pets, random fits of screaming in your headphones, dizziness, dry mouth, and hysterical amnesia. Spelltable may not be right for those with poor social skills, childish mentalities, and a severe lack of patience. You should always consult with a medical professional before beginning the use of Spelltable. Let's get started with the basics today. And what exactly is Spelltable?
So we thought, I thought that we should do a little history lesson because I'm always curious to know, like, you know, what are the origins of things? Where do they really come from? So Spelltable, for those who don't know, is an online platform for playing paper Magic the Gathering. So it was introduced in April of 2020. It was originally called VirtualEDH after the EDH format. And this happened after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. They told us all to stay indoors. So some very creative people got together and said, we're going to make a program that allows people to use their webcams and connect over the internet and play Commander. So later they expanded beyond the Commander to other formats and rebranded with the new name Spelltable, so it didn't feel like it was so exclusive to EDH. They did the expansion in May of 2020. So all this happened pretty quickly. And then in August, just a couple of months later, the creators of Spelltable joined Wizards of the Coast. So Wizards of the Coast swooped in. They saw that this was happening. They wanted people to be playing the game, and they realized that they weren't able to go to their local gaming stores. So and when that happened, it was announced that the considerable resources and relationships provided by being part of Wizards of the Coast would allow them to continually improve the app. So it has continued to grow and be refined over the time since then.
Right. So Spelltable does have some pretty awesome features. It has integrated audio and video, a built-in card indicator, life and damage tracking, and infect tracking. There's multiple video layouts, so you can have it whichever way you want it. And then it has a turn indicator and a turn clock as well. So like it helps keep track of absolutely everything like that. There's also like a coin flip, there's dice rolling, there's all sorts of other wonderful features that are on the app that I can't, or not app, but the website that I can't stress enough are absolutely incredible.
And that segues fantastic into what we want to talk about next. And I was immediately thinking to myself, I want to ask you, what's your favorite one of those features? But we're gonna move right into the first kind of more broad discussion question, which is, what's good and bad about Spelltable. What do we think are the good things? What do we think are the things that could be improved? So I'll let Zombie go first here. So what's the good and the bad about Spelltable?
So, one of the great things about the spell table is all of the features that are included: the health tracking, the commander damage, the card indicator, which is like all you have to do is click on the card and it will pop up on a sidebar and tell you exactly what the card is. You can also search for cards. So, like if you have, you can like there's like a gatherer like attached to it. It's not the best gatherer in the world. It doesn't necessarily always have Oracle text and everything like that. But like, let me tell you, those features are absolutely incredible. Now, there's a couple of features that I would like to see. Well, by a couple, I mean one major one that I would like to see added in is a day night tracker. Like, surprisingly, there's not something that can help you keep track of day and night unless if it's like a card on someone's board. Um, but really, that's just a minor nitpick. But I think honestly, there's so much more good that comes from Spelltable. That's like the minor nitpicking that I have. Like it's so obscure, you know. So
Mhm.
why don't you go ahead and tell me what you think is great and what is negative about Spelltable?
As soon as we started talking about the features, or as soon as you started talking about the features, it occurred to me that some of these things are so excellent that you immediately start taking them for granted, and you don't realize how much value there is in them. And the one that really comes up for me is the turn clock and the turn indicator. Like knowing how long we've been playing is very valuable, but having that yellow box around whoever's turn it is, as long as everybody is keeps up with it, is very valuable, because how many times in a paper game have you got so lost in just being goofy with one another that
Whose
suddenly we
turn
don't
is
remember
it?
where we are?
Yeah, whose turn
Yeah,
is it again?
whose turn was it? We completely forget it, and having a visible representation of that, I think, is very very helpful. So some of the other things that I really like, I think, and mine are kind of more, I'm going to say, philosophical. So I really like the fact that Spelltable allows people to connect over distance. I know a lot of people who play the game who don't live anywhere near me, who I don't see very regularly, but they're actually, yeah, we don't actually live next door to each other by any stretch. We're in the same general area, but it's far enough away that we don't get to actually see in person very often at all. So, but we get to play every week
Mhm.
together on Spelltable, and this is what I have noticed, is that for the life that I am living right now, having access to a remote version of the game has increased the amount of play that I'm getting. I couldn't even put a number on it, like, so much.
Right.
And that alone makes it invaluable to me. It is so very very useful for that reason.
But before you get into your
Functionality,
cons, I want to actually mention something here.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, good.
like with like my schedule, like I can't play until 10 o'clock at night, and there's no card store anywhere that's going to be open after 10 o'clock. So like, just being able to play Magic whenever I'm available and to be able to find a game or create a game and people come in, it's so quick. Like that lobby, the matchmaking system. I don't want to call it matchmaking because like you just see all the lobbies that are available and you can just click on whatever game you want. And the generally the titles are pretty giving to what like kind of game you're gonna play.
Mm.
And like the fact that I can find a game in 5 minutes and shuffle up and play, it's incredible. Sorry to interrupt you, but I forgot to
No,
mention that
not
on my
not
part.
not at all. Top three lobbies right now: Doctor Who Plane Chase,
Nice.
six to eight, no inf, no mox, which power level 6 to 8, no infinites, no moxes, and then eight-ish.
Yeah.
And so you have some information walking into it, and there's other stuff too, because there's languages. I
Yep.
see a Portuguese game going on. I see a whole bunch of English
Hmm.
games. Some that just say other, which is very interesting. They're probably doing Klingon in those rooms.
Or they just
Um,
didn't change it because the default is other.
Is default other? Okay.
Default's
Well,
other.
that ruins the joke entirely. So practically speaking, I very much like that it keeps track of life, poison, and commander damage, and that like the drop down menu allows you to put commander damage in for all of your opponents. Even in person in paper, keeping track of that with dice is really cumbersome, and a lot of times we'll use an app on a phone to do life counters. Here, it's built right into the system. You don't have to do that.
Right.
So some cons, and these again are kind of more, they're broad. It's not cons with the system, but cons with the world, I guess.
Sure.
So there's a barrier for entry. To be able to use the system, you have to have the tech to use the system. So that means you have to have a computer that will, you have to have a computer, you have to have an internet connection, you have to have a camera, you have to have a microphone. We'll go over the more of that in a bit, but that is what you need to play. And if you don't have those things, you can't use this service. So that's kind of it's not a small barrier for entry. So, and I want to talk. You and I have talked about this at length. Is the difference between in-person play and playing over the internet. And this is something that anybody who's ever done online gaming, ever played an MMO, ever, kind of chatted in a Facebook group or even done a group Zoom, you probably have some experience with it, with what happened to the world in the past few years. And chances are it's a mixed bag. There are some times where you're like, this feels fine, this is good even, and there are other times where it's like, wow, this feels very inauthentic and there's a lack of feeling and connection here. So it is kind of that double-edged sword where it's like you're getting something that you wouldn't otherwise have because of time and space. Right, because I really appreciate that you pointed out the time thing. It's not just about geography, it's also about time. And that's what the internet does, isn't it? The internet allows you to connect with other people at any time, in any space, as long as you have access to it. So both of those things are true. I've really wanted to go back to playing in person, and I just haven't. And I think some of that is I know I have access to it right here at my desk. And so the motivation to go back to playing in person is somehow stifled by that. So I think in my book that's actually something of a negative.
Yeah, I mean, it's also hard to find time in our busy schedules to set aside 4 or 5 hours to go to a local game store, because I say 4 to 5 hours because one, you have to get there, then you have to find a game, and if there's only 6 or 7 commander players, you're waiting for a fourth or whatever. And then you have the anywhere from a 20-minute to a 3-hour game, which holy moly, we had a 3-hour game on Spelltable the other day and it was absolutely ridiculous.
That easily the longest game I have played in recent memory. I cannot.
Oh my god,
we've had some slogs, but that one really took the cake.
I got down to 15 cards in my library. That's like, and like, don't get me wrong, I had a wedding ring on a player that drew a lot of cards on their turn, but I still only had 15 cards left, and I was cascading into things that I couldn't, I just couldn't cascade anymore because I didn't have something low enough to hit.
Yep.
So
yep. Talk about running out of gas. We were all emotionally and physically out of gas at that point, and your deck just you fought so hard to stay in that game, and your deck just ran out of gas. I mean, at some point the physics of the situation catches up with you.
To kind of get into context, I have a Gallifrey Stands deck, right? And there was 2 turns in a row where I just needed to make it to my upkeep and I win the game. And it was like, I'm going to board wipe. And then all of a sudden I'm like vomiting doctors out again. And it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. But there's another cool thing. I'm going to real quick add this in. There's been times where I'm playing with a guy in Germany who's got up for work early, and he's getting ready for work right after this game. It's just cool that I get to meet people from all across the world and at the cost of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true. You wouldn't have that experience in person.
Definitely not. And he was great too. Anyway,
Yep.
next up, let's talk about what we need to play Commander on Spelltable. So what's on the list of what we need?
So to start out, as I just pointed out, you need the tech. And so this may seem very basic and probably going without saying, but I'm going to say it. You need an internet connection, and I'm going to take it a step further and say you need a fairly stable one, because you are going to be transmitting video data, you're going to be transmitting sound data, and it's not streaming a game or anything, but it is a lot of processing all at once, so you're probably not going to be able to use something like lower powered or with less RAM to be able to do it. You are going to need some processing power. This isn't, don't need a gaming computer, but you probably are going to struggle on a Chromebook. So,
Right.
so internet connection, and then very, very basic needs. You need at least one camera, and you need a microphone. So most laptops are going to have a microphone built into them, but and most headsets will have them. This is just headphones. This isn't really meant to be a rig where I'm, being recorded or anything, but most of them have a microphone built into them. So you can have a very, very simple headset that would work just as well. The camera is the tricky part, but the good news is you can use your cell phone, and Spelltable makes it fairly easy and intuitive to do that. I myself did that for quite a long time.
Same here.
Yeah, and it really was just when you and I started getting into content creation, started getting more cameras. Like now I have
I have too many.
too many things.
I
And then,
have 3 cameras on my desk right now.
right. And so for that reason, now it's a little simpler. I can actually leave my camera set up all the time, and I don't have to change it out. But phone works just as well. I do recommend plugging your phone in while you're playing if you have a cord long enough to do so it doesn't go out. So what else? What else do we need?
So another thing that you actually need to play Commander on Spelltable is actually a Commander deck. Now, it can be a paper deck, which most people use, but it could also be a digital deck. There's a couple of websites, Moxfield and Archidect are the two that come to mind rather quickly. And there's ways you can play test it and actually project it. We'll get into that a little bit later. So another important thing that really helps with the Commander experience on Spelltable are your add-ons like tokens, readable dice from your computer. It's really good to have tokens of what they are. For instance, for the longest times, I was using just Pokemon cards, shiny Pokemon cards from the OG 151, but they don't work really great on Spelltable because of like you put them on the table and then somebody forgets what they are, and then you're constantly saying, oh well, this is a 3/3 beast, instead of just seeing the 3/3 beast. So that's kind of important. Just try to have tokens that your deck produce. You don't have to necessarily worry about what other people produce. Another good token replacement would be infinite tokens. I really want to invest in some of those because then you're just writing what it is, which is also niceful. And then also don't have a confusing playmat like mine. My playmat is my kids playing Magic 6 layers deep. So there's 6 games of Commander happening on my playmat. So I've had people come in, see people playing Magic, even though it's my playmat, and then just immediately. So those are like a basic playmat, something that has one image that's going across is usually fine. Any of the ones from Ultra Pro would probably be pretty good as well. But
Hashtag sponsor us.
Yeah, please. But my kids are too adorable to pass up, so we're gonna do it. It's my Father's Day present. I need to make sure I use it.
What a terrific example of here, take my advice because I'm not using it.
Yeah, because everything I say is perfect, but I'm just not going to do what I say because I'm not perfect. But yeah, my kids are adorable. Okay, they like taking these pictures every year.
I think that it's good advice, and it's one of those things where if you have the option, right, and you have other things that you can do on there. Our tendency as players is to kind of like blank out our stuff a little bit. I actually find it didn't. I hadn't thought of this till just now, but like foiled out version of cards or alt art versions of
Mhm.
cards, I tend to lean away from them now. There
Yeah,
were
I could see
definitely
that.
moments, and really like that. That's also just me as a player and how my aesthetic. Like I actually kind of want the OG look as much as possible. As we get more and more different art and frames and stuff, I want to do it less. I just do.
Well, that's
I
just
mean, there's
because
I
we're
don't know.
dinosaurs.
That's probably it. Is that like I pine for the days when damage went on the stack, and
Mhm.
for that reason, I want the cards to look original and for artifacts to be brown and not silver. But really, I think that I lean away from those things because I think that the card reader has a harder time hitting them. And I know that
Yeah.
they're harder to see. Like I try to make my setup here in such a way where people can actually see what's going on
Mhm.
my playmat, and they don't have to ask a whole bunch of questions because they can just see it. And that is the difference between the virtual play, one of them, and online play is that when you are in person, you can lean over the table and look at a card
Right.
or ask if you can see it and get that information a little bit more quickly. But
Right.
um, so since we talked about what you need, you mentioned Moxfield and Architect. I want to expand on that a little bit. This is something that you have done and I have not done, so I'm going to let
Mhm.
you kind of dive into this a little bit. What do our listeners slash viewers need to know about using Moxfield or Architect on Spelltable?
So, in order to use Moxfield or Architect on Spelltable, you are going to need a couple of extra programs running in the background. So your PC is going to need to be a little bit better. And also, having multiple monitors will help with this.
Mm.
I have a 3 monitor setup, so it works perfect for me. And while I'm playing, I stream on one monitor, I have the game on another monitor, and I have Moxfield on my third monitor. So like it just kind of having more monitors for this will make it a whole lot easier. Not saying you can't do it without it. It just makes it a lot easier. Um, so what you do is you'll need like a OBS Studios or some like Streamlabs, OBS Studios, and a couple other programs can make a virtual camera, and then you make a scene on your your studios, turn your virtual camera on, and then you can just use that as your source. So you can then put your pictures or do whatever you need. Like I have a picture of my playmat as the background, so I get my playmat no matter what. It's amazing because you can turn the green screen on and have whatever picture you want as your playmat. So you can make your playmat anything digitally. Um, but there's a couple really good things that come out of playing with Spelltable and Architect. When it comes to the card reader, since they're digital images, the card reader works almost instantaneously when clicking on the cards of a digital player, which is really cool. But also, what that does is allows you to playtest a deck against real people before you purchase it. I think if you have the capability to do it, you should try it at least once to get the experience. And I love it. I build all my decks on Moxfield now because of this. Because then I'm like, okay, I'm going to see if I want to buy this deck in paper or not. Sometimes I play the deck a couple of times and then I'm just done. And I'm like, okay, cool experience. If I ever want to play it again, I still can play it on Moxfield. And if I want, I can buy it like I did Bilbo Birthday Celebrant. So, um, so a lot of good qualities of being able to play your digital stuff on Spelltable. So, now that we kind of talk about what you need and how you can play on Spelltable, I really want to know what your first setup was like and what's changed since then. Because I know my first setup was ridiculous, and I'm pretty sure yours and mine was rather similar.
Hmm.
But yeah, I want to hear what you got for me.
So I'm trying to remember exactly how it came about, and I don't remember. Did you find Spelltable?
I did. The professor had an episode of what Spelltable was,
Ah.
and I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. I need to learn how to do this.
So I mean, I'm trying to remember exactly the sequence of events, but I think you either just like told me about it, or you maybe just turned me onto that episode, and I took a look at it and kind of took some suggestions out of that. And one of the suggestions, I don't know if it was in the video or not, but it was very much like take a cardboard box, cut out one side of it, cut a hole in the top of it, and now you've got an arch that you can put over your desktop. So you can put your camera down and in the top of it, so you can take your camera and point it down with the camera running, and now all of a sudden your camera is taking a picture of your playmat. So that and it really at that point I was on a much smaller desk, and what I was using to play with was probably a little bit different. But you and I have been playing for years, so I have playmats, I have dice, I have tokens. So all of that stuff was very much there. I'm a regular computer user, so I had a computer that was capable of running it. I already had, I'm probably still using the same headset as I was then. But the phone was my camera for really quite some time, and I definitely had games where the game ended because my camera or my phone
ran out of battery.
Energy.
No.
So that's the early experience as I remember it.
So my early experience was very similar to yours. I also my wife loves to order things on Amazon, so getting the box was easy. So I actually cut 2 holes in it. So I had one of those battery powered lights, and I would have the battery powered light on the side. My phone, I had 2 holes, so I had the battery powered light. I had my cell phone, and then this was back when my stream setup was a laptop, a 24-inch monitor. I had this really crappy USB mic. I only had the one webcam, so it was pretty janky at first. But now that my stream setup has evolved, we'll discuss what it is in a minute. But I want to hear what your current setup's like now.
So, I mean, for those people who are watching, I can actually just show you, because it's right there. So this is my camera, and it's hanging from a camera stand that's along the wall. So it's actually a clip stand. It's meant for a phone, but I just ran this little webcam through it. It points directly down at my mat, and behind there is the box that has all my commander decks in it. So all of those things run through my computer station, throughout the rest of my desk space here. Basically, but the best upgrade is without the arch, the cardboard box going over the top, light is less of a factor. And I am glad that you mentioned that, because I totally forgot about it. I absolutely did a similar thing where I had a lamp that was made out of plastic that I just jammed it through the cardboard, so it was stuck in there and the bulb was hanging out inside. Always trying to figure out just the right amount of like softness over it so that you didn't get glare on the cards, and I never got it right.
Which, it's almost impossible with a setup like that.
Right, and even now, like the only light that I use when I'm playing, there's a lamp behind me on this side over here, and I put it at the lowest possible setting to get the minimal amount of glare on the cards, and it's still...
you had dead zones for days.
Right, it's tough to find that right thing. To me, that's one of the greatest challenges is getting the light just right so that people can see your cards, but that there isn't glare. And some of that is sleeves, some of that is foils, some of that is light. So that's always difficult. So how about you? Where's yours? How do you feel about your setup now?
So my setup has evolved to a crazy good PC, like computer gaming rig. I have another webcam that I have on an arm attached to the back of my desk. And like, since I use OBS Studios to use as a virtual cam, I can color correct and change brightnesses and stuff like that to be exactly what you need to see everything on my board. So like I can have pretty low lighting in my room. So like I only have a bright light for like coloring on my face, and then I have a ring light as just so I don't have weird shadows on my face. And that's all the lighting I need to light up my board. So since I have so few lights, I don't have really many dead zones of glare on my board. And having the I have a really fancy microphone. You can see right here. This is a Rode Pod mic. It's a XLR microphone. So now I have like a thing that I can control the volumes of all the people around me and things like that. So like this setup is way over the top and not necessary to play on Spelltable. But since I'm trying to, get into the content creation and make a job out of it, I figured I might as well upgrade to get one of the best stuff that I can get. So that's my current setup. And boy, let me tell you, it's been great.
I will definitely say that, like, for those who, without the means, like I think that the simplest thing that you can do that's going to improve your setup is to get an arm like the one I just showed you.
Yeah.
You can get a functional one of those for somewhere between $10 and $20, depending on where you go. Find a Five Below in your area. You could probably get one for $5. Like you really don't need something super great. You just need something that can hold your phone, and you can use that as a camera.
Right.
So that's item one. I would definitely put on there so that you don't have to have a box over your setup anymore. And then item two is to get an actual webcam, because then you don't have to use your phone to do it. The webcam's connected to your computer, and you can use, as I showed you, you can use that webcam, hook it up to the arm that you buy. It's the first upgrade I would recommend for anybody.
So this arm here, I got on Amazon for only $15. And I actually have 3 of them. One for my microphone, one for my webcam, and then one for my ring light. And all webcams, I can show you with this webcam, have a little hole here that's designed for this arm. So like you can just like, it's rigid in the sense of it, like the arm itself doesn't move, but it swivels like this, or swivels like this. And then there's 3 joints that can control like the positioning. So you can get whatever angle you need, as long as, and it has a C-clamp on the bottom, so it can attach to the side of your table that you're using. It doesn't even need to be a desk. Like any table will work. So it's a really great purchase. It's probably one of the best purchases that I've had for my setup, were these arms.
Yeah, and really, like, that's the first thing I would recommend to anybody working on upgrading that thing there.
Alrighty.
So next we're going to move into what is it like to play on Spelltable. What are some things that we've learned about interacting with other people in this virtual space? I could go a long time talking, like, from a sociological standpoint about what interacting in a virtual space. But we're going to try to keep it grounded here, and what has our experience been? So the way that we're forming it is, what's good Spelltable etiquette? What are some things that you want to take into consideration specifically for when you're playing using this format? There might be some crossover here with how you would play in person, but I think there's some things we take for granted that maybe we don't think about. So we just want to clue everybody into some things that we've learned, so you can maybe up your own game. So I'll let Zombie start here. What comes on your list? What's some good Spelltable etiquette tips?
So one of the most important things is figuring out who should answer the questions about cards and effects. So I think the person that should be answering the card should be the owner of the card. Because I mean, I'm super guilty of this. I like to flex my game knowledge. So like if someone asks a question, I'm like, oh, I know the answer. It's this. But like if it doesn't affect me, it's super hard to not talk over someone on a digital platform. So it's just easier if you have the person who asked or the question is asked towards answer the question. So like if someone says, "Hey, what does that card do again?" Instead of you hopping in, have that person who just played the card answer that question because again, super easy to interrupt people on digital. Then it's like then there's that lull of okay, who's going to talk now? And it just solves that problem immediately if you just let the person answer. Another really important thing to do is try not to hide your cards when you're playing something important to your game plan. Kind of mention that it's important since it's a digital format. It's really, I wouldn't say it's really hard to tell what's going on, but like it's more difficult to kind of tell what's going on other people's boards because like I mean I'm playing on a 27-inch monitor and it's still hard for me to see every single card and know exactly what that card is. So when you're playing a very important spell, say, "Hey, I'm playing this. This is what it does." It's kind of important. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get some sneaky wins and someone will say, "Oh, I had an answer to that, but I didn't know how important it was." Like give people the opportunity to respond to your things by saying, "Hey, this is kind of important."
Yeah, I think that both of those are really good points. That when I think about who's answering questions, I'm I know that I have the same thing. I think most people who have been playing the game for a long time, and most people who are interested in the game, have that quality where we want to flex our intellect. We want to show that we know the thing. And the problem with that is that if we're all want to do that, that means we're talking over each other, and in a digital format, that we don't have the nonverbal cues to kind of pick up on when somebody's being upset by that. So all we get is if I'm talking over somebody, I don't get to see their facial expressions and body language to tell me like, oh man, I may have just caused a little harm there. So it's really good to have this as part of the Rule Zero conversation, and it, like, just to kind of throw it out there, like, hey, if there's a question about a card, can we agree that the person who owns the card is going to get first crack at answering that question? And if once they've answered, there's dissent
Or something wrong,
on their
right?
answer, if someone disagrees, then it is you might even consider using the turn order to have this conversation, but let the owner have the first crack at answering it. And then, like, to your point of pointing out the important cards and how they interact with what's on board, right?
Right.
So I'm going to play this card, and if it's not clear, this is what's about to happen. I'm going to play this card, and with these other things in play, this is what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Like, making it very clear that information is all there, but because because you're not on top of it, because you are viewing it through the monitor, you're not looking at all the different pieces all at once. So helping people out with that. It's, again, remember, this is courtesy that we're talking about here. Is it your responsibility to point out to your opponents in the game? Technically, no. No, it's not. But do you want to be the kind of person who is a courteous player, who shows good sportsmanlike conduct? Do you want to be that person, or do you want to be the person who plays the card when nobody reacts to it, you win because nobody understood the interaction? Is that how you want to win?
Right.
So also on the list is board organization, and this is like a tale as old as time, right? Even in like paper Magic, this is something that can get really, really hairy and really, really out of control, because when you get to complicated board states like a 3-hour game, or a game against Tom Bombadil, or really, or your Shrines deck, anything that gets like a lot of game state and permanence on board, it really can get out of hand. So do your best, and sometimes that means kind of putting some. What I've found myself doing is kind of pulling my lands down a little bit,
Right.
So that they're not necessarily fully on the screen, but like half on the screen, you can still see them. I try to make it very clear how many I have available. Like if I have tap lands, try to like stack them and put them to the side and show the untapped ones very clearly. Like any small thing that you can do to make your board easier to see, is it again, it's good etiquette. Um, in terms of Spelltable in particular, this question comes up a lot of how long do we wait for somebody if they disappear, if suddenly they just their screen goes black. A lot of things can cause it. They might be disconnected, they may have just rage quit, you don't really know because their screen's black and they're not talking anymore. This again is something when we talked about our Rule Zero conversation, we brought this up, and we do think that this is something that you can talk about in advance to get everybody's opinion on. I think that the standard thing is a couple of minutes. Like, I mean, if you have the time, waiting 3 to 5 minutes to see if somebody rolls back around, just talk to everybody at the table and see how they feel about it.
So there's a
And
couple
then
of indicators.
I added.
Oh, go ahead.
Good.
So there's a couple of indicators determining whether someone left or if it's a digital problem. So like if someone immediately joins the game that's not that player, they left. There's no
Okay.
there's no coming back from that. There's no point of waiting for someone. So like there's been times where someone would rage quit and then 30 seconds later a different player joins the game. They left, they're not coming back because a lot of the times when someone like disconnects, the lobby becomes broken. And by that, I mean, it'll say that there's 4 players when there's only 3 players left in the game. So if someone else comes in, generally that means it isn't right or that the person quit. So give them a little bit more time. And also there's times where like someone's camera will just glitch out and you'll still see their name on top. And then all they need to do is just like fix their source or something. And then you can actually give them directions because they usually can hear you and sometimes you'll hear them talking. But so there's a couple of indicators whether they've left or not. But yeah, so I think all the points that you brought up are very good as well.
So one more before we move on, and this is actually I think that this is a good lesson for people playing in paper as well. And if you've never played in like kind of tournament level play, it is really expected that you are calling your plays and being accurate about those calls. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Like there's information that occurs in the calling of your plays that's going to be relevant to whether or not somebody is going to respond to it. And you don't want somebody to respond before they have all of the information. And we've had some stories about how this could really change the dynamics of something. Like your old casting Ulamog and getting it pact of negation. Like there's
before I even
information
declared my targets, right?
Right. There's information that should have been declared, and that's not your fault. That person jumped on that very quickly. So being patient about responding to things and giving people a chance to respond. So here's what I mean by calling your plays. When you are casting a spell, you should tap the mana and say, I'm going to cast this spell. Put the spell on the table and then pause, give everyone a chance to respond, even check in with them. Are there any responses to that? If the answer is no, then we can proceed with it resolving. But you want to be very, very clear about it and not just tap your mana, drop the thing on the table and say go. Say the name of the card. This is what I'm casting. Call your plays. It's actually even more important in Spelltable, but I would argue that it is very, very important in paper play if you want to be a good, courteous player and keep it and give everybody the information that they are in fact entitled to. It just helps. It helps the flow move along, right, as far as I'm concerned. And for me, I feel like it connects me to the game a little bit more. This is why I love playing Tom Bombadil, because the sagas are from all the different multiversal realms, and they're ridiculous when you play them together. It's hilarious to me that all these different things can be happening. So saying the whole name of the cards is very fun for me. Like, I will cast Genesis of the Daleks in this Lord of the Rings deck. I love that bit.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I very much agree with calling your plays. You can even go as far as, hey, does X person have a response? And like actually go and pass the priority to that person. Because there's been times where I'm player one, I cast something big and scary, and then immediately player four responds with like a counter spell. But player two could have had a counter spell and they could have been like, no, I don't want to do this. Now player two has a benefit of not using that counter spell because player four jumped the gun. So like when you're playing something really big and important, like say it
Go around the
and
table.
then say, hey, do you have a response? Do you have a response? I know that adds a little bit to the time, but that just makes it more smooth, like as a gameplay experience as well.
Well, right. That is strictly speaking following the rules to their actual letter. Like if you were playing in a digital format like Moto or even Arena, like you would have to do it that way.
Right.
Like especially Moto where you can play multiplayer, you can play
Mhm.
Commander on
Yep.
Magic Online, and when you do that, like it literally does pass priority around to each of the other players when
Yeah.
something goes on the stack like that. So it's very very good about that. This brings up another point for me though, is that when it comes to calling out your plays, say that you are casting the spell and you also have to declare targets
Right.
and you have to declare modes if it's a modal spell. You all of that information, everybody gets that before they make a
Right.
decision as to whether to respond. And the couple of recommendations as far as targeting goes, be specific in your targeting. Say the name of the card if you can. Like I understand that we don't all know the names to everything, but
What?
it's very very useful to say, I'm casting Path to Exile, targeting Garth One Eye because I am sick of you playing Black Lotus. Um, like
Oh man.
I'm right, or I am playing this spell with these modes, targeting these things. This is a pet peeve of mine. So I am going to attack you. Who's you?
It's very because like you can't point to somebody. I mean, I
Right.
can because I have like my face on the my board now.
So you can go.
You.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, most of the time you don't. So, and on Spelltable, like we've gotten in the habit of, there is actually like there's a parentheses that you can put there that's meant to be for pronouns, but like most people just use it for their abbreviated name, which I really actually I love that. I
I do too.
appreciated that
Yeah.
that has become the convention. So you have your online handle, you have a shorter name that you could put in there. So mine has both. Mine says Jetterex in parentheses. It says Tim. So that's perfect because people see it and they'll quickly come up with it. And that's something that we've adopted as part of like the introduction part
Right.
is like we ask people to introduce themselves. So now we know what they want to be called. We know
Right.
what we're going to call them for the rest of the game. Call people by name. I'm going to attack Zombie with this. I'm going to attack Joe with this. I'm going to attack Coca-Cola with this.
It also
That
helps with
kind of
pronunciation too. You know what I mean? So
thing.
um like since I spell things a little bit weird in my handle and stuff just because of requirements and stuff. So like I always get it called a zomboy, which to me doesn't make any sense, but I can see where they make that mistake.
Yeah.
And then I can just say, oh, just call me zombie. But something that I want to suggest with the whole pronoun section, if you're a content creator, go ahead and just throw your like mine is my link to my Twitch is twitch.tv/zombie apocalypse. So and then like I invite people to watch my stream and then they're like, oh well, what's your Twitch handle? It's right there. So it's just another thing, like if you're a small content creator like myself and you're trying to grow, you might as well just try to have the people that are playing with you watch while you play, because I don't give any added benefit to my stream except that I'm a handsome face and my chat's hilarious. So but there's one last thing that I want to mention before we go into the next topic is if you're having a bad time of it and you rage quit, please don't come back into the lobby with the link of the room and play really loud screaming noises or any obscene things. This happened to us only once. but it was one of the worst. Like I was having a great day, and then it just made my day awful. Like he would come back in, play the screaming things, and I would kick him. But since he saved the link to the lobby, he could just get back in, and then he would just keep doing it. And I'm like, dude, like, grow up. Like you're acting childish. My kids don't even act like that. Like when they don't get what they want, yeah, they'll have a hissy fit for a moment, but they're not ruining everyone else's day. So please, 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 please do not don't be rude to people. Like it's
bad. It's bad for the community, right?
Yeah.
Like if you want to be able to play, you have to kind of sign on for the contract that we're going to treat each other with a certain amount of respect and I would go even further. Actually, I would say we're going to treat each other with a certain amount of kindness. Like we're going to take care of each other. And I mean, for me, when I play Magic in spaces with other people, virtual or in person, one of the things that always attracted me to this community and keeps me coming back to it is that I feel like we can sit down at a table with people that we have never met before and immediately develop a kinship to them. And you do that by being kind and trying to have fun and trying to be supportive of those people. So doing stuff like that, where because you're having a bad time, you literally ruin the room for everybody else. I mean, it's the definition of selfishness, and it really is bad for the community. So you're not really helping anybody by doing that, and you're really actively harming the community by doing it. So yeah, that was a unfun experience, and apparently was something that was going on at the time. If it ever happens to you, try very, very hard to remember the username of that person and report them to the admins in Spelltable as soon as you can, because that's the only way to cut down on that. I don't want to be a narc man, but I also don't want people to ruin my rooms when they're having a bad day.
Yeah, for sure. So now that we've talked about like Spelltable etiquette, we've talked about the stuff that you need. Let's talk about some like card effects or spells that really they just don't work well with Spelltable. Yes, you can use them. There's nothing to say you can't. One of the cards on my list specifically, actually, you have to kind of break the rules in order for it to make it work. Yeah. But there's just some cards and any effects like this. Tim, why don't you go ahead and get us started off with your first card, and then we'll bounce back and forth, I think.
Yeah. So the first card on my list is called Shadow of the Enemy. So it's from Lord of the Rings. It's 3 black, black, black. It's a sorcery. Exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard. You may cast spells from among those cards for as long as they remained exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast them. So you can do this one. Logistically, there's nothing stopping you from doing this. But for me, my problem with a card like this is the scenario where this card is amazing is where you're getting a dozen cards with it, where you're getting even less than that. 6 or 7 cards would be amazing. It's like drawing 6 or 7 cards for 6 mana, right?
Seems out of
your opponent's graveyard. Sounds great, right? The problem is that there isn't a great way, because space is at a premium. There's not a great way to have that list of cards there. I'd have to get a pen and paper, write down the names of all those cards, and keep track of them.
And like really look them up and stuff too. Like that just seems so troublesome.
It's burdensome, and it's more than and it's so burdensome that I'm gonna pick another card. And I chose this one to start the conversation off with because it kind of lends to this idea of changing the way that you build decks based on the format. And we definitely, I know I think you have as well. We've changed the way that we build decks for Spelltable because there are just some things that that feel bad because of how burdensome they are for me or even for the other person. And I start to weigh that, like, is this making it so we have to do a whole lot of work in this game that we're playing? Right. I want to cut down on that at least a little bit. So, and I pointed this one out because I built a deck called H&K. It's Hidetsugu and Kairi.
Episode's right here.
Right. So Hidetsugu and Kairi is one of my favorite new decks that I've built just because it's very, very unique, and it wants to play big mana cost, big mana value sorceries. And I looked at this card, because the deck also mills people sometimes too, so I can fill somebody's graveyard up. It fit in a lot of ways, but the more I looked at it, the more I was like, there was actually a lot of cards for that deck that could have made this list. The more I looked at it, the more I was like, I can't include that because I just think it's going to be a pain in the butt to play on Spelltable.
So, real quick question: do you have in that particular situation? Do you own that card, and then if you go somewhere in paper, do you slot those cards in, or is it just one of those things that seems like too much work, and you just have your deck list the way it is?
In that specific case, I do in fact own that card, and I actually own a super fancy extra, borderless version of it. And I think the answer: I don't like slotting out cards. I don't like having to change my deck for different situations.
Sure.
I don't even like trading a card out from one deck to another, even though there definitely call for it sometimes.
Right.
I think I have right now, I think I have more than one deck that's using my Mondrak because it's an expensive card and I don't want to have to buy another one.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But boy, I hate doing that. The second item on my list is, and I use this example because I actually do have the card in the deck, but due to the nature of the card, I actually specifically skipped this one bit because of how much I don't like doing it. So I chose the Cruelty of Gix, and it's a saga. It's in my Tom Bombadil deck, and it has read ahead, so you don't have to pick all the chapters. And I promise you that I will never pick chapter 1. I will always start on 2, or perhaps 3, but I will probably always start on 2. So chapter 1 is target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a creature or planeswalker from it. That player discards that card. So I don't like targeted discard. In Spelltable, and I don't know if it's actually any worse on Spelltable. I thought Thoughtseize and these other things, that there are cards where you're looking at the player's hands, but now that I think about it and I'm saying it out loud, they might all say that they reveal their hand.
I was about to say, honestly, it's not too awful because it does say reveal.
Right.
If it was one of those where it's kind of hidden, it's supposed to be hidden information. Actually, my first card is kind of similar, and I'll go into that after this.
And I didn't realize it until I read the card out loud, but I'm not sure how many discard effects like that are look at target player's hand or target player reveals their hand. I think more often than not, it's they reveal their hand. So logistically, it makes a lot more playable. But boy, do I hate this effect. I hate this effect generally speaking, but it is, it was on my list of cards I don't like playing on Spelltable because I don't like having somebody to have to reveal their hand.
I also just thought of another card too. I'm going to add to the list here.
Isn't that always the way? As soon as we actually get into the conversation, that's when we really start figuring out what we want to talk about. So the third one on my list is called the Horus Heresy, and it's from 40K. It's another saga that I had originally in my Tom Bombadil deck, but I changed it because I really felt like I didn't like what it was going to do on Spelltable. So first chapter is for each opponent, gain control of up to one target non-legendary creature that players controls for as long as this saga is in play. And I pointed this out to kind of be an example of a whole category of cards, which is cards that gain control of permanents on other players' boards. You can do it. Logistically speaking, if you have a card that can just represent it, they can move it off of their board. You can put something that represents it on yours. It's definitely possible, but there's just something about that interaction in paper. I kind of love it. Because you get to actually move their card over, and there's a feeling that goes along with that. For whatever reason, online it has a bad feeling to it because again, it's just doing extra work. Now I have to make a token of that thing. It's so much easier when I can reach across the table and grab the actual card. And that kind of speaks back to I skipped over this when talking about Shadow of the Enemy. So Shadow of the Enemy would be fine in paper because I could just take the cards that were exiled with it, put it in their own little pile over here off the board, and I'd be able to look at them regularly and see them. And again, that would be done instantly, very quickly, seconds. to write all the lists down, it's going to take me more time than I want it to, and it just takes more effort. And that's the same thing with the Horus Heresy. Like, now I have to make 3 tokens of these 3 creatures I stole. I felt the same way about Clone Legion. It almost made my cut. That was a card that almost went in H and K, and it ended up not going in there because I didn't want to have to make tokens of every dang creature that I was stealing on the board.
Oh, so Clone Legion, you can't choose your own stuff?
For Clone Legion?
Yeah, can you not choose your own board? I thought that's what you would be doing, since usually your board's kind of more important than everyone else's.
Oh, you can target yourself, and I did not know that.
I wasn't sure. So
way to correct me in the middle of a podcast.
You're welcome, sir.
The final thing on my list is it is taking control of another player's turn. And the card that I put on there, the example was Ebrakul, the Promised End. Very, very infamous card, and that people often don't like playing against. It's a card that I might avoid just for the feel bads, generally speaking, but I recently built the colorless Eldrazi deck, and I have an Emrakul, and I really want to put it in there. Yeah. And it is just almost impossible to logistically do without, because when you can take control of target player's turn, you can literally get up out of your chair, move around to their seat, and take their turn for them from their perspective. And there's something kind of fun to me about doing it that way. But on Spelltable, you would have to reveal their hand, which is not a part of that effect, if I'm understanding it correctly. So you really, there isn't a way to logistically do it without kind of breaking the rules a little bit. And for that reason, and a lot of others, really, it's a lot hard because you really have to tell the person what to do then. Instead of actually just walking over and doing the things for them, you have to tell them what to do, which just ends up feeling, a lot more logistically burdensome, and that's why I don't like it.
Yeah, I've been Emrakul'd with my Garth deck, and it was just way too complicated. I had to, every 5 minutes I had to retell him what was in my hand, because with my Garth deck, I'm going to have 13, 14 cards in my hand anyway. So it's just all right, now I have to reveal all these 13 cards, and then I have to explain to him what some of the cards do. And it's it's very cumbersome. But I have some similar type effects in mind, because we did come up with this list separate. We didn't look at each other's lists before we started. So luckily we didn't really copy each other, which is pretty cool. But my first card is Opposition Agent. Really cool card. I actually pulled one of these when it first came out, and I'm like, oh, this is a really cool card. I would love to play it. But again, it's you control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. And then while an opponent is searching their library, they exile the card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. So, because then you basically have to reveal their whole entire library and say, oh, especially if they're I Demonic Tutor, I flash an Opposition Agent. Okay, tell me what your whole entire deck list is. And now everyone else knows what your deck list is. And then I have to make a copy of that card. And it's just a lot of work. Cool card. Bit stacksy for a lot of people's taste. But yeah, it's just too much work to do. And I'm so glad I haven't run into it yet.
I've had mine sitting in the binder ever since I got it. I cracked one not too long after you did, and I was like, "This card's amazing," and I'm never going to play it.
I'm never going to be able to play it. That's right.
It's even a rogue, and I wanted to put it in my party time deck, and I was just like, "It's eating up a spot," and I can't.
I wouldn't cast it. Yeah,
I wouldn't cast it. It'd be a dead card, so I might as well just not put it in there.
That's right. So the second card on my list is Sauron's Ransom. I hope I said his name right. I am really bad at reading names. Anyway, it's a 3-mana instant. It says choose an opponent. They look at the top 4 cards of your library and separate them into a face-up pile and a face-down pile. Put one of the piles into your hand and the other into your graveyard, and then the ring tempts you. I built a Sauron deck on Moxfield that was all cards from the Lord of the Rings set. And this is one of the cards that I actually put in the deck because, it relied a lot on the ring tempts you. Because when the ring tempted me, I could discard my hand and draw 4 cards or something like that or whatever. And I drew this card and then I read it and I'm like, how am I going to do this? Like, I have to reveal the 4 cards, and since I have to visually see what cards I'm putting down, I now know all 4 cards, which makes it so much there's, because the cool thing about it is there's this hidden information that you're not supposed to know. And like they could put 3 cards face down and 1 card face up, and that 1 card could be really good, but those 3 face down cards could be really, really good. And like it makes that interesting choice that when you're playing on Spelltable doesn't exist anymore because you already know what all 4 cards are. Like, don't get me wrong, this card's amazing. Would love to have it. It's a 1 mana cheaper Fact or Fiction that costs like yes, it's 2 color identity, but like, oh my god, I love this card to death and I can't use it.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking actually of putting Fact or Fiction on the list, and again, logistically you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've seen is that when people play that card, it creates a burdensome state where they have to now look over these 5 cards and try to figure out what are the good cards among them. So anytime when you're having to interact with your opponent's cards or deck, it really adds a layer of burden when you are playing in this format. So, and I still think Fact or Fiction's fine, but this card, because of, as you said, the hidden information, it's just, it doesn't do the same thing when all of the information is revealed.
Yeah, Gonti Lord of Luxury is another similar effect that like I kind of want to put into this because they're supposed to have
it is
four cards and they exile 1, but like in order to
your
reveal,
opponents don't know what it is. Yeah,
I'm not even supposed to know what it is either. So like it's just, I love that card too. I used to have a Gonti deck and not anymore. Not since Spelltable is a thing. But the next card on my list, it's the same kind of concept as Opposition Agent. There's 2 cards that do the very same thing. One is Bribery, and the other is Acquire. The only difference is Bribery searches for a creature, Acquire searches for an artifact, and they're both 5 mana sorceries. So again, both really cool cards. Like, it's a lot of fun sometimes to just search for their best creature or their best artifact and put it into play under your control. But again, you have to search, and then you're supposed to search their library, and then you have to ask them, okay, well, what's your best creature, or what's your? It's just, it takes out of the fun out of that card, and since you have to then make a token of it, it's just not what it should be. I think it just kind of takes the fun out of the card. And then the last card is Perplexing Chimera. This card's really cool. I like the idea of it. And then like I used to run it in a Blink deck. And what Perplexing Chimera does is a 5 mana enchantment creature. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may exchange control of that spell. If you do, you may choose new targets for that spell. If the spell was a permanent, you control that permanent. But it's a very hard card to get rid of. It kind of like brings chaos to the game. And then if you flicker it and bring it back under your control, you just, okay, let's see if you get that spell or if I get to keep that spell. I had it in a rune deck and it was so hilarious. But again, then you're talking about giving him your stuff and then you're taking their stuff. And again, it's the whole like, I have to touch your cards in order for this to work really well. And when I can't just go, ooh, give me your stuff, like it really takes the fun out of the card and makes it way more complicated.
Yeah, it's like when you have to add so many extra steps to a motion that would normally just be,
here you go.
Here, like just putting the card over here, and then I'm taking this one from your board. Like very quick exchange. When you have to do anything like that, there's layers of complexity added to it, which can really cut down on the fun. Unless, again, if you have a system kind of in place for making that happen more quickly, which is why the infinite tokens are a good idea for everybody to have, because you're likely to get tokens that you didn't plan for in a game of Commander, so it makes them very valuable.
Beast Within's like a very common card, and you're going to be making a 3/3 beast almost every single game. So
yeah. Put treasures. Put a treasure token in every Commander deck, even if your deck doesn't generate treasures. Because I'm playing Ascent to Avernus or Descend into Avernus, and you're getting treasures if you're playing against.
Yeah, I love that card too. And the last card that I just thought on the spot, telepathy. Each player plays with their hand revealed. People don't do it very well, and again, your space is very limited. So if you have to put your hand on your playmat as well as your lands and your creatures and your enchantments and your artifacts and your planeswalkers, like you just don't have space. And like I actually played against someone, and like they wouldn't because then you have to say, okay, I drew this card. Dude, I've had people cheese with telepathy. Like they wouldn't tell you the cards they were drawing. So you're like, oh, I can't tell what you have. So really the telepathy is just doing nothing but making everything compact and more confusing. And dude, oh, that game made me mad because like I had answers and he drew the card like a couple turns ago, but if he told me he drew that card, I'm leaving my answers open in my hand.
That's right. And that's the difficulty, is that everybody needs to be following the thing if you're, because you're not getting the value out of what the card is trying to do at that point.
Right.
It's the same thing with Sauron's Ransom, is that like the value of the card is that they have to make this choice with limited information. If they have all of the information, the choice is way easier and it's not a big deal at all. They don't get the negative impact of it, so it just ends up not being as positive. And it's the same thing for that one. If they're not actually revealing everything as they go, this happens with play the top card of your library revealed stuff often too.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't great at kind of calling stuff out as they go. Like, that I have this card, and that is challenging in paper, even in paper, to make sure that the cards that are revealed, that people are aware of it. I usually try to set my hand down and put the cards people know about face up, but that's just me. You don't have to do that because people are supposed to be taking notes, and I don't ever do that.
Yeah, why would I take notes? It's a casual format.
Mm-hmm. So finally today, we're going to kind of start to close up here with the last minute technical issues, some things that we've run into. It is a web-based program. You're going to run into some issues from time to time. We're just going to talk a little bit about our experiences and see if we can give you some suggestions on what you can do to manage some of those things. So Zombie, would tell us about some technical issues you can remember.
So one of the main things that happens, it probably happens to me probably like once every month or twice every month. And that's where the lobby breaks, where someone will come in, decide not to play with you, leave, and it will still say for 4 players. So you won't get that fifth, or you won't get a 4th player, even though there's 3 players in the game. And there's actually a really easy fix. You just say, hey, I'm going to make the same lobby with the same name. Join me if you still want to play with me. And that's what I've done. Works really well. And then the 4th person comes in rather quickly. And then the last problem that I can really think of that I've had, and this one I actually never found an answer for. So we were playing in a game. Everyone else was okay with this one player's camera except for me. Like their board was just a green light. If you go back on my YouTube VODs, you can maybe eventually find it, but like it was just frustrating for me. But everyone else could see this deck. So we've tried to set up new lobbies and that didn't work. So maybe there was just like a NAT problem between mine and his internet connection where it's like I can't process information from him. But like I ended up having a horrible time. It wasn't that like what he was doing was broken or anything. It was just like, okay, well, I'm playing against 3 people, but I can only see 2. So really, it's me versus 2 players, and then I have an extra opponent that means nothing. Like he's affecting me, but I can't really affect him with any of my interaction, and it just was not a good experience. So if something like that happens and one of your players just can't see what you're doing, honestly, it's better to just say, "Hey, look, this isn't really going to work out. I really would love to play with you, but unless if you can get this camera solution fixed, I don't think we can play with each other again. Maybe we try again another day. Look for my lobbies because like for me, I always name my lobbies the same, but look for another lobby because it's not going to work out playing with you." And yeah, sometimes it sucks to have to be like, no, I can't play with you, but if you're going to have a miserable time or if someone else in your group is going to have a miserable time, it's not worth doing. It's not worth wasting someone's time for an hour and a half if they're just not going to have a good time of it. Like it's one of that courtesy things.
Well, you can't play the game, right? Like you can't, like if you can't actually see all the stuff on your opponent's board, you can't really just go by we don't go just by auditory reference alone. We are actually looking at the board state. We're getting a lot of that information from just looking at somebody's board. A lot of the time, I'm not asking questions about people's boards. I'm just looking at it and getting the information myself. I don't necessarily want them to know that I'm looking at this permanent on their board, or that it's kind of a like you don't. I know, but I don't know if you know if I know.
Right. So I'm actually a chess player. Okay, I'm not a great chess player. I honestly mainly play chess because I love playing the puzzles. It just gets my brain working. But a really important thing that good chess players do is visualize the board. But we're only talking of an 8x8 square that only has 32 moving pieces or whatever the math is, and Commander's way more complicated than chess, man. Let me tell you, there's so many more different pieces. So like
you need to see the board.
Visualizing the board in just your head is nearly impossible. Like I was doing okay in the beginning of the game, but once turn 6 rolled around, I'm like, okay, whatever happens. I can't.
Yeah, it's basically at that point you're interacting with the darkness. You are screaming into the void.
I cast magic missile.
If you happen to be able to conquer it, then great. But like you're not interacting with anything. You're just trying real hard to go for the win at that point. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, and as I said, we didn't find a problem for it. But what are some technical issues that you've had experience of dealing with?
I just want our listeners / viewers to know that I had a hard time answering this question, and we talked about this before we got started today, and I think that says a lot. I think it says a lot about how effective this system is because I think of how simple it is. It is very, very rudimentary, and because of that, it's successful. They haven't added a whole lot of unnecessary stuff to it or unnecessary complexity. It is simple, it is clean, it is effective. So you may find that the card reader has a hard time working sometimes, and there's a couple of things that can impact this. I mentioned a few of them earlier. If you're playing with foils, unfortunately, sometimes that actually can cause the card reader to not be able to see the card. If you're playing with alternate arts, and listen, the system knows about the alternate arts. It does. But for whatever reason, my experience is that the alternate arts, it has a harder time reading those. So if you have the option and you know you're playing on Spelltable, maybe bling down that deck a little bit. Go back to the traditional version of the card if you happen to have it. As I said before, I've noticed myself leaning towards the traditional printings of things recently because I think that they read better. And also, this one comes up a lot. So when people orient their cameras, sometimes they're oriented in such a way where you're kind of looking at the playmat as if you were the person sitting at that table. And I think that that's preferable because all of the cards are upright and you're reading them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people have their cameras oriented the other direction so that they are essentially upside down for the viewer.
Right.
And Spelltable does provide the function of being able to flip that video. When you do that, it makes the card reader function a little worse. So if you're having a really hard time reading people's cards, maybe flip their board back around, learn to play on the upside down board. It's a little tough to get used to, and really, like there is a search bar in the right hand side of the screen where you can actually just put the screen name. I use that quite a lot. I ask people what the name of the card is. I just look it up, and then what all the cards that you've looked up throughout the game are kept in a little list there. So getting used to that interface and using that regularly is a great way to cut down on that, and to improve the card reader's functionality. Glare is a big thing too, so consider your lighting, work on it a little bit, see what you can do to kind of make the light level enough to see the cards, but not so much that it's glaring off of your sleeves. My understanding is that there are some sleeves that work better for that as well, like some that don't glare quite as bad. I don't know which ones because I just don't know that much about sleeves. So, and then finally on my list, um, microphone and camera misconnections or mess ups are a pretty frequent thing. The most common issue that we see is not having the right source hooked up. So when you are in Spelltable in the settings, it will tell you what microphone and camera you are connected to. So to give you an idea, if you're working on a computer, a laptop, for example, most of them have built-in cameras. You probably don't want to be using that one. You want to be using your phone, using a webcam. So if you're connected to the wrong one, you may be having a trouble there. The same is true about the microphone. Most computers have an internal one if it's a laptop. If you're using an external mic, you just want to make sure that you have those connected properly. Any other tech issues you thought about while we were talking about this?
I was thinking, I'm pretty sure they have like an advanced card reader. I'm looking into it now where like you can like adjust the parameters to it. I'm looking for it. I'm not seeing it now. I'm pretty sure there's a setting for it. I'm really trying to find it.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, that kind of does lead to another, one last thing to kind of talk about, which is, they are constantly updating this program, and they're making it a little better. The card reader, actually, it's remarkably functional. I don't want to make it sound like it doesn't work a lot of the time. Frankly, it does work quite a lot of the time, most of the time, I would even say, which is remarkable. Considering the complexity of the game, how many cards there are now, that database is huge, and it's got all those cards in it. And if you actually type in the name to the search engine, you will find it for sure. Most of the time, just clicking the card on somebody's board is going to find it. So it's really, really great to have because it does make the online experience quite a lot better.
maybe it was just a beta thing from the past and they took it out because it wasn't working properly. I'm not
Maybe.
seeing it here. But we will keep you up to date on that, whether something like that happens. So, yeah, I think on like just final thoughts on Spelltable as a whole. It's a really great way to play Commander with random people. I mean, I have a whole Twitch show about playing Commander with randos. Like it's like my shtick. So, great way to play. And there's a couple of nitpicking things that I could talk about, but like overall, great way of playing Magic, especially for someone with as busy as a schedule as mine. And like I wouldn't be playing Magic right now if it wasn't for Spelltable.
It's true. And we've talked about this before and frequently that, like, I mean, I had considered myself a Commander player before. I was definitely into it. But really, this has broken that world wide open for us and made it so that it is something we are able to do almost every week without fail. I have played more games of Commander in the past 3 years than I did in the rest of my life combined. and that has everything to do with this system with Spelltable. So to those who generated and created Spelltable, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Like, we are very grateful that this exists. It really got us through the pandemic, and it's really created a new opportunity for us to make content and to talk about the things that we do. So we are forever grateful for it. Hashtag we love Spelltable.
Hashtag sponsor us. Yeah, I think this is a good place to kind of end things here.
Okay. So everybody, now it's time to say goodbye to all of our friends and opponents. So thank you kindly for spending time with us on the AZA Commander podcast. I'd like to remind everybody one more time that you can support the show and all of our other content by watching this and other videos on the YouTube page, checking out our streams on Twitch, looking for us